I feel like I've seen you in hats. Are you a hat wearer?
I don't wear hats.
I want to talk about
crimps
that.
my mullet.
That one hat you said you wished all the hats that you wore were that one that were just like the flat one, the one that's tight to your head.
My Husqvarna hat, I love that hat so much, and I also love that's my Mountain Equipment Company hat.
Okay.
Yeah, I love that hat too because you can crunch it.
The ones that I've seen you in are the super tight ones. Super, super tight. From Webisodes, this is GrowAbility, a podcast at the intersection of urban agriculture, food security, and community.
On this episode, I speak with Urban Roots Executive Director and epic bucket hat wearer, Anna Badillo.
Urban Roots is an innovative initiative that takes underused land and uses it for, you guessed it, urban agriculture.
Holly, one of the amazing things about this interview was that before 2020, Anna had no real farming experience.
And neither did the organization's founders. They just wanted to help people access healthy foods in sustainable ways.
I think it just shows that anyone can get involved in growing things and the power of community.
You did kind of get in on the weeds on this.
Nice.
Particularly on the environmentally sustainable farming practices and food literacy, but the rule of thirds model you two discussed is amazing.
It all comes back to community building.
Plus, her hat is pretty epic.
And if anyone listening wants to see me in a hat or offer questions, suggestions, and ideas for future episodes, send them to me at joe@growabilitypod.com.
Thanks once again to Siskins, the law firm, for opening up their beautiful space for this interview.
And now, our very own hat trick, my conversation with Urban Roots, Anna Badillo. Anna, it's so wonderful to have you here with us. We're going to record an intro for the audience, and they'll give some background on you. And just for our audio-only listeners, know that Anna is wearing a bright red bucket hat, the words Farmer Anna, and a picture of a tractor embroidered into it. Do you wear that all the time?
I do wear that all the
Very
time,
nice.
Yes.
Okay, so what's the story with the hat?
Okay, so during the pandemic, everyone's life was slowing down. You're in a few lockdowns. I bought a pair of overalls at a thrift store shop, and I took on this persona of like a Farmer Anna. And I would take photos with me in my overalls with different type of animals at farms because there's really nothing to do. So that was what I was doing to entertain myself. And my best friend decided to buy me a hat that said Farmer Anna with a tractor on. And then it turned into, then I was taking like photos in different areas with the hat and the overalls. And then I made a calendar for 2022, a Farmer Anna calendar. And it was just photos of me throughout the pandemic with animals, different places, and just, it was really funny. My family had a good kick out of it, and I gave it to everyone for Christmas.
So tell me your friend didn't find that hat thrifting.
No, she actually bought it on Etsy and got it custom made for me.
That's very cool. How did you get interested in farming?
So actually, I have no background in agriculture. My mom always tells me this story when I was a kid. She asked me if I wanted to go to sleepaway camp, and I was like, what am I gonna do? Like sleep on a rock? Like I wasn't really like, I played outdoors a lot, but I wasn't really into the whole outdoor farming agriculture scene. But then again, pandemic, your life slows down. I really got interested in watching the trees grow and throughout the season. And then my family, we're Italian background, so my family has always grown their own produce, tomatoes, things like that. So I decided, I was like, you know what, I'm going to try this out. It was a basil plant. My aunt bought me a basil plant. And she told me, if you can't keep a basil plant alive, you're a loser. So that basil plant did die, but after a year. And then I was like, you know what, I really like this. It was fun. So then my great-grandmother back in 1935, when she first came over from Calabria to Canada here in Toronto, she brought over her tomato seeds, zucchini seeds, cucumber seeds, and pole bean seeds. And so my family has continued to grow from those seeds over the years. So I got some seeds from family of mine, cool. And then I started growing my own thing. And now it's like a labor of love. I love it. It's trial and error all the time. I don't always have great success, but and then also working at Urban Roots, I've learned a lot from our director of farm operations. So I picked up some skills there, but I would not say that I'm a real farmer. Definitely a persona, but fake it till you make it. So,
that's it.
Yeah.
Speaking of Urban Roots, you're the executive director of Urban Roots. Mm-hmm. What is Urban Roots?
Yeah, so Urban Roots is a labor of love, I would say.
Yeah.
The core original 4 founders of Urban Roots had no farming experience or background. Only one grew up on a farm, and he was like, I'm never going to work at a farm, ended up co-founding a nonprofit farm. And I think that really speaks to the underlying tone of Urban Roots. Even our director of farm operations, no farming background, but everyone has a passion for growing and a passion for community building and really for sustainable living. And I think that is what brought Urban Roots together and grew this project into what it is today. So we are an urban farm, and we not only cultivate and grow on that land, but we also work a lot on food security and that community building aspect. So we're always trying to get food out, to distribute it out to people that need it the most. And the founders of Urban Roots really believed in removing the barriers to access healthy, nutritious food. And we've seen over the years that demand continue to grow as food insecurity is growing in our city, that there really has been a place for Urban Roots to be able to grow in a commercial scale and really get that food out there and not have those barriers limiting for people to access.
And it's inspiring. So 4 non-farmers started an urban farming space in the city and are assisting with food security.
Mm-hmm. Who would have thought?
Who would have thought? So why did you want to take on the role of executive director?
Interesting, because it's not like I applied for the role.
Okay.
But I love that I ended up in this journey. So actually, I decided my background in schooling is social justice and world religions. I did my master's in international peace studies, actually overseas in Ireland. But I really have always had a love for grassroots organizing and community building. So I decided to come back to London and take a non-for-profit management program. Right. I wanted to get back to work in the nonprofit space. But I was working as a manager in another industry, and I really wanted to continue into that role. And I had to do a placement. And with that placement, this is also at the same time of me taking on this farmer Anna persona. And I was really interested in Urban Roots' market operation, that model. And so I was like, well, I've had a couple friends that have worked for them before. So I was like, I'm just going to try and do my placement there. And they accepted me, which was really great. And so the first summer I was the market manager, and that was fun because I loved meeting people that came to the market, really kind of connecting with folks and that community building aspect. And then there was a role that opened up for an outreach coordinator. So I switched into that after that contract was done. And then I was going to go back into the market manager, but then they asked me if I wanted to be the ED role, because the original ED that I hired got a job teaching at Mohawk College. So she went over there and recommended me. And so I kind of took an admin role in between as we transitioned. And then I ended up in the ED role, and it's been really wonderful ever since.
Yeah. You've earned that.
Yeah, now I probably have earned that.
I would say you earned it. Urban Roots talks about growing fresh, healthy, connected communities. Mm-hmm. What do you see the link between agriculture and community?
Yeah, I see a really big link, actually. I think what's unique about urban farming and urban agriculture is that it is on a smaller scale. So you can incorporate that community aspect a bit more than it would be in rural areas on large farming. It's quite hard. But what's really nice about Urban Roots and connecting that community is that we started off volunteer based, right? So it was really, Urban Roots would not be where it is today if it was not for those volunteers that came together and built that community. And then over time, that's expanded. We do a lot of volunteer drop-in hours. People can come by and just, get their hands dirty. And through that, they're not only rebuilding the relationship with the land, but they're building a relationship with those around them. So the other farm staff, the other volunteers, when we have groups come out, whether it's school groups, organizations, corporations, there's really that aspect of team bonding on the farm when you're digging in the ground, pulling those weeds for some time together. So I think that's kind of where Urban Roots has allowed for that community building by working with our hands and building the relationship with that land. And with that comes that with the community as well. What type of food are you growing? So at Urban Roots, we grow a whole bunch of different varieties of vegetables and fruits, mainly more on the veggie side. So for example, we've grown 6 different variety types of kale. I did not even know there was 6 different types until I started working at Urban Roots. But we grow a few different types of tomatoes, and we really try to have variety so that, it's not the same thing you're finding at the grocery store. You're trying something new, which is what's exciting. And you're also learning new ways of growing, or not growing, but eating with that produce as well.
Food literacy.
Lots of food literacy, yeah. Mm-hmm.
So do you grow everything on one site? Is Urban Roots a one site space?
So over the years, we have expanded. So we have 3 sites now. Our main farm site, we grow on about an acre, and we can produce about 20,000 pounds of food. And this year we are expecting to surpass the 20,000 pounds, which is really exciting. And then we have 2 other sites. So one at Salem United Church, and we have our fruit production there. And we do grow some vegetables as well too. The fruit production has been a little bit tricky for us. So we are, again, labor of love of learning. Yes. So we are learning the fruit production side of things, but everything grown at that site goes right back into our donation affordable tier. And then at Parkwood Hospital, we have another urban garden site there, and everything grown on that site goes right back into Parkwood, and they use it for their menu planning. And then the mental health patients get to use it for therapeutic and recreational purposes too. Wow. Yeah. And I would say each of those sites probably grow about 1,000 pounds of food on them. And they're a lot smaller of a scale.
I've heard the term model of thirds.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
And there will be listeners that may be very familiar with the term, but for those that aren't, how would you explain that?
Yeah, the model of thirds, it's a working social enterprise model. So it's 3 tiers. We have a donation tier, affordability tier, and a wholesale market rate tier. So the co-founders, they went and visited Detroit urban agriculture scene before starting up the project here. And something they realized was that they were really heavily reliant on grants and, the donation funding. So they wanted to create a model that allowed for some self-sufficiency, some economic stability. And so they came up with a model of thirds. So we do sell the produce at an affordable rate, and we have 2 tiers of selling those affordable produce. We have at our farm gate market, which is about 50% off what you'd find market rate. And then we also sell at an affordable rate to our social enterprise partners, and that's about a 25% discount off that market rate too. And then that wholesale market rate, in the past, we have sold specialty items to certain restaurants in London, or or other types of like food outlets. That is quite hard for us to upkeep because of, restaurants need everything consistently, and not everything with urban agriculture is going to be very consistent, especially at the mercy of Mother Nature. So we found, we started a community supported agriculture food box program. And that's actually been really helpful and allows for that upfront investment from the community of folks that can purchase a food box. And then we distribute that out weekly from June to October. And so it comes out to about 22 food boxes for the season. And that really helps with that 3rd tier, that market rate tier. That's intention that we can build that up over time, and that can at least cover our farm operation cost. And then our donation tier, we do donate out to our donation partners that do their own food programming, food security work. Could be Glen Cairn Resource Center, the Food Bank, our Aid Mission, et cetera. And so we can't do all of the frontline work. We have to work a lot with partners, and our partners really are doing that frontline food security work. And so it's really great that we can partner up with other folks in the community to really expand our outreach.
And that's how we build community, through connection.
Yes. Of course. Yeah.
The term food system equity, which sounds like it's linked to food security. How would you describe that?
Yeah. So we were, the co-founders were really big on choice. So a lot of times folks are, when you're food insecure and you go to pick up a donation, or folks are donating to you, don't really have the choice there, right? That equitable choice to choose the produce that you want. So the original co-founders really wanted to incorporate this in the way that we were working and the food system that we were creating. And so that's a really big component in when we partner. We intentionally partner with equity deserving groups, especially with our community pop-up markets. So that's also under our affordable tier, which that produce is pre-purchased at an affordable rate. And then we distribute it out to the community with our partners, and they host pop-up markets targeting low-income neighborhoods across the city of London. And that's at no cost to those individuals and families to access that. And through that, we've impacted over 7,000 individuals and 2,500 families. And that even furthers our outreach. And that's where that equitable piece comes in. where like we really want to get into the hands that need it the most and having no barriers. So we're really big components on not having to prove that you're impoverished to deserve, that donation or whatever it may be. Anyone can access those pop-up markets in those neighborhoods. Anyone can access our farm gate market. We really wanted to remove the barriers that is implanted in our food system, unfortunately, especially those that are food insecure trying to access healthy food. And so that's kind of where that equitable piece comes into. We also are not just, we own the land that we're growing on, but we don't like to call ourselves landowners. We're stewarding the land. So we really want to center the land too as well within itself, that it's equitable and deserving of good growing practices, taking care of the soil, good quality soil, low tilling, really putting that nutrients back into that soil to keep it healthy. And as the soil's healthy, the produce is healthy, you're eating healthy. And that's kind of where that cycle comes in.
And then the next generation will steward it.
Yes. Yeah.
Continue the good work. Mm-hmm. Is the model of Urban Roots, is it unique to Canada, the United States? Are there ideas? We talked a little bit about Detroit. Are there other ideas that have been given or gleaned to other groups?
Yeah, I think actually our farm manager mentioned to me that he was at a farming conference in Guelph, and there was another organization in Toronto that was basing their model off of our model of thirds, which is kind of cool.
Very cool.
Yeah, I would say urban farming is not unique. Like Urban Roots is not unique to that. There's been urban farming, across Canada in different cities, Ottawa, Toronto, out west as well. I think maybe what makes Urban Roots unique is the sense of, incorporating different elements. So like our Parkwood site is unique. Like there's hospitals that have garden sites that patients use for therapeutic and recreational purposes, but they don't use the produce that's grown there. Right. So that's a unique thing where they're actually putting it back into the hospital. And that takes a lot of winning over people to really believe in the mission that it could be possible. I think like those little pieces bring that uniqueness to Urban Roots. I would say maybe too as well, like, how Urban Roots started and that process of being unique in the sense that we really the core mission was always just how much, like, let's grow as much of it as possible and really get it out there. Like less concerned with, that profit driven mindset and more concern in centering, that social justice, that human rights aspect, equitable, deserving, healthy food, nutritious food. And maybe that's a little piece too that's unique. Urban Roots, two of the co-founders were professors at Western University, right. And they had soil quality is a really big thing on their radar. And so with growing sites, we were always testing the soil. And that was something that makes a difference, right? Like the land that we're on used to be a horse farm. So very good quality soil. Yes. But that makes a difference for the produce. And that's not always the case for a lot of folks. We always say to folks, if you're going to start growing, test the soil first before doing anything. So maybe I would say that piece is also a little bit unique too.
And, we've mentioned a little bit about food literacy. And when we talk about projects like the Parkwood Project, mm-hmm. it's challenging what has become the standard food system, mm-hmm. which is, foods that are generally more processed, industrialized, mm-hmm. Going into larger organizations. And, what I really love, and there's a lot of things I love about Urban Roots, but one of the things that I really love is that food literacy, natural, healthy grown foods. Mm-hmm. And it's interesting that it challenges our more industrialized food system that we're used to. Yes. Is that conscious? Is that a conscious decision?
Yeah, I think that is a very conscious decision. I think also, it not only challenges the food industry, but it also challenges the health industry. Like food is medicine. And I think that's been lost, and we've lost that piece, especially, I would say, due to colonialism. And I find that, it seems like it's a niche thing to want to go back to like growing your own food, working with the land and, eating organic, but our food was always organic before. So in reality, we're just going back to our roots. Ironic, Urban Roots, going back to your roots. But yeah, I think it's a very conscious choice. And that's kind of what I really love about Urban Roots is that we're not just doing, the talk, but we're also walking that walk. Right. We're walking it with our Indigenous partners together. And, we're benefiting from indigenous land that we get to cultivate. So we very much do work with, we have partners in Oneida Nation with knowledge sharing. We do work a lot closely with SOHAC and other organizations to really get the food out there to them. And then, but also on the receiving end of learning as from their growing practices and us teaching them too about different growing practices. So it's really that really nice partnership there. And and I think like when we talk about food as medicine, there's always that saying like, you are what you eat. And I think what I love about the Parkwood Project is that it is partnered with Nourish Leadership, and Nourish Leadership is a nationwide program that is trying to change the food system within the hospitals, especially when you live in a city where your demographic is so diverse. You don't just have, you have different cultures that are your patients, right? And everyone hears a thing when you think of hospital food, you think of like some gross Jell-O on a tray.
It's a punchline.
Yes. Yeah. But actually, I had no idea. But before, hospitals used to have their own butcher. They had gardens, they had kitchens, they had chefs. That was a part of the hospital. Right. And so again, going back to the original roots. And so I think that's what's so lovely about Nourish Leadership is that they're trying to change that. And I would say one of the most successful ones is up in the North End, a hospital up in Northern Ontario has allowed for the Indigenous community there to their hunting meat and gaming meat to actually incorporate that into the menu planning at the hospital there, which is a huge, because they have a huge population of Indigenous folks that are there that are going to that hospital, and it's only right and equitable that they're able to access their traditional foods as well and not just a bologna sandwich. So I think that's what's really great about when we change our mindset of thinking about food as medicine.
Another thing I'd like to talk about, ecosystem accountability. Can you explain to the uninitiated what this term means to you?
Yeah, so the urban roots, it's to be accountable of taking care of that land in a proper way. So it's not monocropping, it's, crop rotation. It's also like not tilling so frequently. It's low till or no till at all. You really don't want to disturb the nutrients that's sitting in that soil. It's also, planting native pollinator gardens, invasive species removal as well. So it's really being responsible and land stewardship and holding yourself accountable to those practices. People can start growing a project and they can take the easy way out and, spray and use pesticides, get rid of the bugs. And we're out there. We have volunteers that are literally picking the potato bugs off of the leaves.
Good people.
Good people indeed, yes. But we don't want to spray. We don't want to use that. We don't want to harm the plants and the produce that's ending up in our body, and that continues to harm us as well. So it's really being responsible and holding ourselves accountable to not just the food, but the land, the planet, and that whole cycle that works together.
You've collaborated with another one of our podcast guests, Dr. Gabor Sass, on the Climate Action Report. Can you tell us a little bit about the report, where you see that report and how it helps maybe develop an inclusive community?
Yeah, I think the report really highlights the link between urban agriculture and climate action that do go hand in hand together. Yeah. And really, I appreciate Gabor and his extensive knowledge on the topic. I learned a lot writing that with him. Right. And we also wanted it to not just be educational where you're learning where the benefits are, but then also if you wanted to okay, this is great. How do I now start my own project? We really wanted that to be incorporated too. So not only learning the benefits, but then how do you start your own garden project? How do you start a raised bed? How do you, if you want to, grow indoors, how do you do all those things? And so that was another big component into the report. And I find that so useful. Sometimes we have Google, right? You can Google anything. It's on your fingertips. But sometimes people just want an old fashioned where I can just look at something and it's there, everything's in one place. So I can just click a link or I can read it and I don't have to further that research. So we really wanted to simplify it for folks. And that's why I really love that report. And I find it very helpful for the community as a useful tool as we continue to understand the importance of growing our own food and how that connects to climate action.
Hands-on learning.
Hands-on learning, yes.
Why do you think that farmers and environmentalists care so much about the environment? What do they see that maybe some other people aren't seeing?
the survival of our species, maybe they had
That's
the
pretty important. Yeah.
foresight.
That's a good thing to get.
I've been actually having this conversation with my partner and family recently because we've been watching some climate change documentaries.
Right.
And people are always like, but it's so daunting. And so how do you convince a whole entire, they were saying in the documentary, like, you're not only saving the planet for this generation and the generations like ahead of us, but it's the unborn generations that we're also thinking about. And, indigenous ways of learning, you're always thinking of 7 generations ahead and 7 generations behind.
Yes.
And so I think that's something that is really important when we think about climate action, climate change, how do we save our planet? And that's something that I think is really the core piece is like, it's not just us. It's, it's not just the younger generation, but it's also all the generations to come. It's our species survival. We have to, we want to stick around. Yeah. So we need to have a livable planet to live on in order for that to happen.
We need good stewards.
Yes. We need to learn to live in the ecosystem, not of the ecosystem.
Okay. For someone listening in downtown Toronto, Calgary, or Halifax, how can they get engaged in urban agriculture in their own communities? Yeah,
so there's community gardens that you can definitely get engaged from with the city level. But also there's organizations out there. There's an urban farm in Toronto that you can actually like rent a plot. Like they provide a plot of land that you can then cultivate yourself, which is a pretty cool concept. It's a little bit different than a community garden where you're applying from the city and you're waiting on a wait list forever. And it's a lot larger than just a community garden. But I also feel like everyday folks that are living in a large city, it's not difficult to start growing a few plants in your apartment, right? Or if you have a balcony, things like that. I do think that it is a privilege to be able to afford to be able to grow your own food at home, especially, living a poverty working class. It's quite hard when you're working long hours and go home and tend to your plants at home. But there's lots of ways to incorporate urban agriculture within the structure of living in a city. There's rooftop growing, hydroponics at home. I myself have a hydroponic and I love it, like having fresh herbs all year round. So I think there are little ways. I just think, unfortunately, right now, it is more of a privilege to be able to access that. And it does cost a lot more for folks to have a gardening hobby. Right. And I hope one day in the future that cost kind of comes down, especially for hydroponics. And I envision like a future of when we're building apartment buildings, you're already building a vertical grow tower in that kitchen, or even like houses or things like that. I think that would be an amazing developmental step. Yeah.
And a necessity.
Yes. Yeah.
So we've talked about a lot of stuff today. Is there anything that you would like to talk about that I didn't ask? Is there anything you'd like to mention? I think maybe
Urban Roots, we started in 2017 and, our 10-year anniversary is in 2027. And I think we've really grown more from just being a growing site to really tapping into urban agriculture education, similar to work that the Patch does. That food security work, we seem to be shifting more towards that. And I think having a flexibility and being adaptable in an organization and really, the demands rising. So really being able to pivot to what the community needs. And I think Urban Roots really does that quite well. And I would love for folks to know more about, we have educational farm tours. We have the hands-on learning volunteer session that, even if you're in the office all day and like you just want to get your team out and come out to the farm and just get your hands dirty, like we would love to have more people to come out to really, teach them what we're doing and how important that is and how they can do it at home too.
It's a very cool thing to do and they should do that. Okay, Anna, what keeps you growing?
Like growing food or just growing in general?
You pick.
What keeps me growing? Hope in... I love when I see the younger generation that are so fired up about climate and doing climate work and climate justice. I think that gives me a lot of hope, and it really switches that switch from folks that are so stuck in the pessimistic state of like, we're doomed. And so when you see the youth coming out here being like, no, we're not doomed, like that keeps me hope, that keeps me growing for sure. It feeds the soul.
That's awesome. Where can people find out more about Urban Roots and the work that you're doing?
Yeah, so we do have a website, urbanrootslondon.ca, and then you can also find us on social media, Instagram, Twitter, Facebook as well. Also, you can just come check us out at the farm, 21 Norland Ave. There's usually always someone on site, so yeah.
We love your innovation and your ambition that you've brought to urban agriculture and food security, and we'd like to thank you for coming today.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you.
GrowAbility is hosted by Joe Gansevles and Holly Pugsley, and produced by Joe Gansevles and Adam Caplan. Special thanks to this week's guest, Anna Badillo. Lighting and camera design by Kevin Labonte, with production support from Oliver Gansevles. GrowAbility's production was made much easier with the help of Jesse Chen, Terry Fujioka, Zack Grossman, Zachary Meads, Leo Shin, and Debora Camargo from Fanshawe College's Broadcasting, Television, and Film Production program. Thanks to Janice Robinson from Fanshawe for arranging for these students' invaluable participation. Holly Pugsley of Just Keep Growing provided the plants and made sure they looked great. Audience and Marketing Strategy by Japs Carmiglani, with support from Dorantina Uka and Tess Alcock. Our theme music is Wandering William by Adrian Walter and can be found on Soundstripe. Thanks as well to Hubert Orlowski for providing technical and audio engineering advice to help our podcast sound great. Adam Caplan, that's me, is Webisode's executive producer, and Sammy Orlowski is our senior creator. Special thanks to Jennifer Routley from Siskins the Law Firm for arranging to host us at their beautiful head office in downtown London, Ontario. GrowAbility is a Webisodes production and is produced with the support and participation of the team at The Patch and Hutton House.